Section 2 of Chapter 3 is going to deal with energy. So the main source of energy on Earth is the sun. This is where all energy is going to be derived from. The sun comes down, gives energy to plants, and we get our energy from the plants. Some organisms obtain their energy from the energy stored in inorganic chemical compounds rather than the sun. So in some examples, you're going to have minerals, water that flows underground and boils out of hot springs, and it's loaded with chemical energy. So those are going to be the exceptions to times when the sun is not the main source of energy. But for our purposes, with what we're going to deal with, plants, animals, things that we see, the main source of energy for all those things is going to be the sun. Now, autotrophs. Autotrophs use energy from sunlight or chemicals to produce food. So that word auto, okay, it's using the sun's energy. They don't have to consume anything, right? They take in that energy. So automatic, all right, troph. We're going to use troph in terms of food levels, all right? So use energy from sunlight or chemicals to produce food. So autotrophs do not have to take in, they don't have to eat, okay? They use sun energy to make their food. Plants, algae, and bacteria are capable of doing this. So plants use photosynthesis, where they take the sun's energy and they're able to create carbohydrates, which we in turn eat, but they can use themselves. Right? Producers are organisms that can capture energy from sunlight or chemicals and use them to produce food from inorganic compounds, also called autotrophs. So producer, autotroph are both interchangeable there. Okay, so here's some underwater photosynthesis going on. We see that very bright spot, which would be the sun, and that is providing sunlight, which in turn is being used to convert as to energy for the plant. Right, sunlight is being converted, and we'll learn about the exact steps that the plant undergoes in chapter 6 or 7. Chapter 7, sorry. Photosynthesis is the process by which autotrophs use light energy to power the chemical reaction that converts carbon dioxide and water into oxygen and energy-rich carbohydrates. So what you need to understand here for photosynthesis is basically the idea that plants take in that sun energy along with carbon dioxide, and they give off oxygen and carbon dioxide, or oxygen and carbohydrates. Sorry, I said carbon dioxide twice there. So we'll talk about that again more coming up when we do the chapter on photosynthesis. But for this purposes, you're just understanding that the sun's energy is allowing them to create carbohydrates. That's really what you need to know now, is sun's energy is used in plants to create carbohydrates. And chemosynthesis, right, is used when organisms use chemical energy to produce carbohydrates. So they use chemical energy instead of the sun's energy. Right? But we're not going to do much on chemosynthesis. This is really it. All right, so if we look at this diagram right here, the top picture is the one that I really want you to worry about. And that is the leaf. The pigments in the leaf are going to absorb the sunlight, and they are going to be, those pigments are going to use that energy to help create carbohydrates. Right? Heterotrophs. Heterotrophs are organisms that rely on other organisms for energy and food supplies, also known as consumers. We are heterotrophs. We cannot use the sun's energy to create our own. Herbivores obtain energy from only eating plants. Now, humans can survive as herbivores, right? Vegetarian and vegan, things like that. We can survive as herbivores. Omnivores eat both plants and animals, and that's the general way in which human beings are consumers. Now, carnivores obtain energy from eating animals. Decomposers are organisms that break down organic matter, such as bacteria and fungi, and detritivores feed on plant or animal matter. Energy is going to flow through the ecosystem in one direction, from the sun to inorganic compounds to autotrophs, and then to various heterotrophs or consumers. The food chain is a series of steps in which organisms transfer energy by eating and being eaten, and the food web is a description of the feeding relationship among various organisms in an ecosystem. Trophic levels are the steps in the food chain or food web. I don't know what happened here to my picture of a food chain, so we'll just skip along to our picture of a food web, which shows the interspecific feeding relationships of organisms. So if we take a look right here, if we were to look at just a specific chain, if we just picked out 3 things here and we looked at grass, mussel, heron, that would be a food chain. But notice that the food web shows all of the feeding relationships. Notice that the hawk eats 3 different things here. It doesn't just eat one thing, right? So it shows all the feeding relationships here in a food web. It's a little more specific. An ecological pyramid is a diagram that shows the relative amounts of energy or matter contained within each trophic level in the food chain or food web. Now, only about 10% of the energy available within one trophic level is transferred to organisms at the next trophic level, and biomass is the total amount of living tissue at each trophic level. So if we take a look right here, we have the energy pyramid all the way to the left, and showing that if there's the 100% of the energy in producers, only 10% of that energy is transferred up to first level consumers, and only 1% of that original energy is up to third level consumers. And if we look at the biomass pyramid, it takes 5,000 grams of grain to make 500 grams of chicken and to make 50 grams of human tissue. Okay? And then finally the pyramid of numbers, showing there that the amount of organisms at each level, there's about 10% less each way. Okay? So that's really showing that the energy through the trophic levels gets less and less. So if we were to eat plants, we're getting more energy than if we were to eat, a cow, which got its energy from the plants.